Welcome to the North Texas Council Vetting Committee for the Dallas County Sheriff. We have with us today candidate Kirk Launius.
Launius.
Thank you for joining us. I'm going to read the rules aloud. No one is allowed to be in the room except the vetting panel and the candidate. All electronics allowed in the room shall be turned off except laptops and the video recorders provided by the vetting committee. Cell phones or voice recorders shall be turned off in the room. No written material or notes will be taken by the candidate. The North Texas Council vetting panel members and the candidate agree that all questions and responses at this vetting session are to remain confidential property until videos are uploaded and considered public information on the NTC website and or alternate website. Verbal questions will be asked and verbal responses to those questions will be given with 2-minute responses for each question. The candidate will receive a copy of his vetting interview recording, upon which time the video is posted on the NTC website and or alternate website. Right. We're now introduce the committee members. I'm Babs Millward from Rowlett.
I'm Linda Brantley from Little Elm.
I'm Barbara Harless from Murphy, Texas.
Don Rutledge from Allen, Texas.
And again, Dallas County Sheriff candidate Kirk Launius is with us today. Please start us off and tell us about your background in law enforcement and what qualifies you to serve as the manager of the second largest sheriff's office in Texas.
Well, my name is Kirk Launius, and I'm a native of Dallas, Texas, and I attended and graduated from Hillcrest High School. I then went to the University of Texas. I studied economics, was Eagle Scout. At the University of Texas, I was involved with student government. I was elected as the vice president of student government for the 50,000 student body there. And I worked for the university as the ombudsman. I also worked for the Alumni Association in Europe, coordinating study abroad programs. I worked my way through college. I worked in various jobs, mostly medically related, worked in doctors' offices. Thought about following my brother's footsteps to go into medicine. He's a doctor. Actually was accepted into medical school, Baylor College of Medicine, and completed a year there and worked in a virology lab during the second year, so I do have somewhat of a medical background. But when I worked in the emergency rooms there, I was interested in talking to the police officers about why was this person brought in, what happened to this person. And I had good rapport with police officers. Always been interested in community service, and I came back to Dallas. I really thought hard about what I want to do for career choice. Worked in telecommunications for a while, and then I went through every program the Dallas Police Department had to offer for volunteers. Citizens Police Academy. My parents started the Crime Watch in our neighborhood near White Rock Lake. Volunteers in Patrol, I started that program. Wanted to be a reserve officer and ended up going full-time to the Dallas Police Academy, hired on, and then transferred to the Reserve Battalion after serving full-time in Southeast Patrol Division.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We're now going to begin the questions. You'll have 2 minutes to answer each of the following questions. Before the last question is stated, you will be told it's the last question.
Okay.
Number 1, what can you do to improve the working relationship between the Dallas Sheriff Department and other law enforcement agencies such as the Dallas Police Department?
That's a great question. As a former Dallas police officer, both a full-time officer in Southeast Patrol and also as a reserve officer and a business owner who served at no cost whatsoever to the taxpayers of Dallas as a reserve officer, I've worked in many duty assignments. I've patrolled the streets of Dallas for years, and then I was assigned to special projects as a reserve officer, Homeland Security projects, working dignitary protection, Secret Service augmentation detail, FBI and disaster preparedness training and so forth. And I worked with other departments. I recently served on a Dallas County criminal grand jury And there we had officers from many different departments throughout the county. There's approximately 31 cities in Dallas County. So I have contacts in many of the different departments here. And I think what I bring, my training prepares me for this job. Having worked as a patrol officer, it prepares me for the work that's required of the sheriff. And I've already had a great deal of experience before I'm ever elected in working with personnel from many different offices. In my leadership experience in the past, both in the Navy, I'm a Navy veteran, I've won awards, Navy and Marine Corps Achievement Medal and so forth for my leadership and management skills. And those contacts that I have as a member of the North Texas Crime Commission, it prepares me to work as a chief law enforcement officer of the county, who the sheriff is, the chief law enforcement officer of the county. I will greatly enjoy working to smooth communications among the various agencies and leading as the chief law enforcement officer of the county.
Great, thank you.
The Dallas Commissioners Court allocates the budget for the sheriff. How can the Dallas Sheriff effectively prevent the County Commissioners Court from micromanaging the sheriff's office outside of setting the budget?
That is true, and that's where working, for example, in my elected position previously, the student government position at University of Texas had a multi-million-dollar budget, and as vice president, I didn't allocate or approve that budget, but I had to work within the budget that was given me, and I will do that as Dallas County Sheriff. I will lead this department with honesty, and I will work to be a good steward of the public's money, the taxpayer dollars, within the budgets that are allocated to me. And I will run the department, I'll run my command staff meetings, and I will gladly entertain good suggestions from any source, any of the commissioners that have ideas about ways of improving the situation, law enforcement for Dallas County. I'm open to any of those suggestions, and people who know me in my past, work in various projects, know that I'm, although I am responsible, I will be responsible as sheriff for leading the department, that I will be open to suggestions and be a cooperative player with the Commissioners Court. But only one person will lead the Dallas County Sheriff's Department. That would be me as sheriff if elected.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Will you seek an increase in the current budget for the sheriff's office, and where do you see necessary changes or reallocation of funds or resources for the 2012-2013 fiscal year?
Mm-hmm. Well, as I'm doing my research now about the current budget, I see that it's ranged recently from about 125 up to 132 million is what the published figure is now. We're in difficult economic times, so I'm actually looking for ways to run the jail operations more efficiently. As a Navy veteran, we inspect constantly. And in the course of doing that, if it's done routinely and not left until problems arise, you can find areas that there could be more efficiency and save the taxpayers money. More money does not always, and many times it does not, equate to better use of the resources allocated. So various areas that I'm looking at are increasing enforcement by possibly reassigning deputies to areas like one of the duties of the sheriff is to patrol unincorporated areas of the county. And as a Dallas police officer, I used to work hand in hand, especially out in Southeast, with Dallas Sheriff's deputies, but I'm told by citizens out there that those deputies have been pulled off those patrols and mostly put onto traffic enforcement on the highways. So I'm going to have to look at those areas. I noticed that 10 deputies were cut from warrant enforcement, warrant execution. That concerns me because the county's growing, and we went from 58 to 48 deputies there. But I'd also look at areas where volunteers, having been a reserve officer, I want to have a significant sheriff support organization, nonprofit group, and raise money for projects that citizens can, like I did, volunteer their time to serve the county and save the county money.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, sir. If ordered by the federal government, would you disarm the residents of this county? And if so, how could you justify this action?
I couldn't, and I wouldn't, no. The answer is no. Second Amendment protects that right, so it's not going to happen with Sheriff Launius.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
National Defense Authorization Act of 2012 funds the United States military. Sections 1021 and 1022 of NDAA, signed by the President on December 31, 2011, allow suspension of habeas corpus or the detainment of American citizens indefinitely without due process or being informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. Would you enforce the suspension of habeas corpus in Dallas County? If so, how could you justify this action which violates the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution?
Well, habeas corpus could only be suspended by Congress in the case of invasion or rebellion. So, and that hasn't, that for Congress to do that now would be very politically dangerous. They would, they're accountable to the voters. So that right is absolute in my mind, and there would not be Dallas Sheriff's Department participation in any such suspension of habeas corpus. Plain and simple.
Thank you.
In the monumental Supreme Court case, Mac Perez versus U.S. 1997, 7 small-town sheriffs struck down the unfunded federal mandate titled the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act. Justice Scalia delivered the opinion of the court stating, the federal government may not compel the states to enact or administer a federal regulatory program. Accordingly, the federal government may act only where the Constitution authorizes it to do so. What is the duty of the Dallas County Sheriff in defending Dallas County residents against the state or federal government in enforcing unfunded federal mandates?
I remember that case. In fact, I met Mr. Brady after he was shot, and I remember back in the 90s that court case. I was interested in law enforcement at the time, and I did a lot of reading about it. More recently, I've gone back and followed that, and I'm aware of Sheriff Mack's participation in that. Yeah, it was those sheriffs in Arizona were pushing back against it because the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms agents showed up at their meeting and told them what they were going to do with no funding to back it up. And it wasn't so much that, it wasn't really a Second Amendment case. It was more a 10th Amendment case, in the case of powers not explicitly granted to the United States are reserved to the states and to the people. And in the case of Sheriff Mack and Sheriff Prince, I think he was from Montana, and the others, they stood up in allegiance to their oath, which I've taken as a Dallas police officer, and I've taken as a United States Navy sailor, and I will take again as Dallas County Sheriff to be the sheriff for all the people of Dallas County, the people. It's spoken of in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, we the people. So that is was an unconstitutional law that the Supreme Court and Justice Scalia clearly defined that they had overstepped their bounds. And so, although I believe Sheriff Mack was the youngest sheriff in Arizona, and all the others, when people asked, what are you going to do, what are you going to do, the others backed off, but he stood his ground and he went and got the legal help. And I would consult attorneys as well if necessary to push back against that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current and formerly serving military, reserves, National Guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath they swore with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help them God. Their oath is to the Constitution. Would you consider yourself an oath keeper?
I would. In fact, in my pocket, I carry a membership card for Oath Keepers. And part of that research I was talking about, and this goes back years to when I was in Boy Scouts. You know, we have the various merit badges, and we study the laws, and that's why it's such a great program. And my parents kept me very busy and active in that until I reached the rank of Eagle Scout. And so, yeah, I'm a member of Oath Keepers, and I keep the cards in my pocket. And it means a lot to me because the oath is everything. It's an oath. It's an oath to the Constitution, as you said, and the founding fathers, in their wisdom, made that oath apply. And every official at the whether they're official of the United States government or the state, everyone has to take that oath. And I'll take that oath again, God willing, in January if I'm elected sheriff. So yeah, it means a lot to me. And people can join as associate members too, and I encourage them to, as I did, go to oathkeepers.org and read about it, follow the news that they publish. They keep me informed. And there's other groups too, Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA. We cannot do offer too much education to our citizens, especially our young people, about our founding documents, about the United States and our state constitutions. We have a Bill of Rights in our state constitution, and young people and people of all ages need to be reminded. I read fairly regularly the laws, and I mix it up and go back often and read and really let that sink in, because that's ultimately when you have to react as a peace officer to a situation. If you've read and understand over time what the laws are, then you'll make the right decisions.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, sir. What do you feel is the best way to improve morale and also recruit and retain good officers?
The same way I have in other organizations, again, going back to scouting, at the university level, when students wanted to organize student media operations like television and radio stations, I led an effort, a task force to establish a student radio station at the University of Texas. I was involved with NCAA track and field, running one of the largest student-operated track and field meets, the Texas Relays. I was the chairman of that committee. Showing people that you're not asking them to do anything that you're not willing to do yourself is part of it. And as sheriff, there's approximately, 600, 700, 800 deputies in a department of about 2,400 employees. And it's not an impossible task to get to know each and every one of them. I worked in a department of 4,000 officers, and it still surprised me after I came back from 3 years in Japan and Korea with the Navy. I got on Facebook and I started establishing relationships with Dallas police officers and officers from other agencies I'd worked with, and I realized just how many people I really have met. Maybe didn't work with them more than a few times or once, but I remembered them and they remembered me. So part of that is showing the jailers, the non-sworn personnel, as well as the sworn deputies, that you care about them, that you're willing to do their job and get out there and be seen. A lot of people, as I go around talking to groups, don't even know who our sheriff is. They don't know what the sheriff does. And in my campaign literature, I've made it very simple. I've actually spelled that out. And people have told me they really appreciate that. So I want to be visible. And then we've had some embarrassing episodes in the news lately about deputies, for whatever reason, thought they could break the law while carrying a badge. And I will do whatever is necessary to deal with that. There's a lot of great people in the Dallas County Sheriff's Department. They just need to be given the opportunity to shine. And I think all these problems go to lack of leadership at the top. It's my opinion after many years of leadership training and experience. So that will help with recruitment too, because when people see that those at the top of the department are qualified individuals who've rolled up their sleeves and put boots on the ground, they will want to serve here.
Thank you. The position of Executive Chief Deputy was created in 2008. What is the job description for the Executive Chief Deputy, and would you keep or abolish this position?
It's an interesting question. I've been reading about that position. To be honest with you, I know in some departments they have, like, actually call it an under sheriff. That term doesn't sound very good to me. But the Executive Chief Deputy basically runs the department, becomes the chief law enforcement officer when the sheriff is outside the jurisdiction. We have a sheriff who's done quite a bit of traveling, and so there are times when basically that individual, you know, we had tornadoes recently. We've had the FBI interrupt attempted terrorist attacks, Dallas County. Anything and everything could happen at any given moment. So that, although I can't quote for you exactly what the duties are, I'm still in the course of my reading my research about that. That individual is basically the first assistant to the sheriff, and has to be qualified to perform all the duties of the sheriff when the sheriff is not able to or is out of the county.
Thank you.
The North Central Texas Fusion Center is operated by the Department of Homeland Security and located in McKinney, Texas. 16 counties in North Texas participate and cooperate with the NCTFC. The Fusion Center collects personal identifiable information that may be of non-criminal nature and shares this information with various law enforcement agencies. What is the relationship between the Dallas County Sheriff's Office and the North Central Texas Fusion Center? And what resources from the Dallas County Sheriff's Office are supplied, and what do you project the cost to be for Dallas County taxpayers?
That's a good question. I'm aware of the existence of the Fusion Center. It's not an operation that I've visited yet, but I'm making plans to arrange that. On the surface, the concept has proven to be valuable in preventing and solving crimes. There's no doubt about that. But I've had concerns about Fusion Center concepts in terms of privacy issues, like you mentioned. Recently, a citizen wanted to talk to me about smart meters, electric meters, and it's not something I've done much research about, but I looked into it for them. And you know, with the post 9/11 age, with protection of, for example, utility infrastructure, which is very important, there is a relationship between the energy companies and the power distribution, for example, companies and law enforcement. The FBI has a program, for example, where individuals in businesses can report things that seem, out of place, and they provide some training for what to look for. That could be precursors to a terrorist attack or something of that nature. But those relationships can also potentially be a conduit for feeding, as you mentioned, private information back to law enforcement outside the scope of the Fourth Amendment, and that's of concern to me, and that would be something I would be very vigilant about. I would ask a lot of questions about. I don't know the level of participation or support or what that monetarily means to Dallas County taxpayers. It's something that's some ongoing research, and I tend to, if I can't get it directly, I'll get it through public information requests. But I will research that further, and I'll be talking about it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. The Second Amendment reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What does the term militia mean, and what does well-regulated mean in the Second Amendment?
Militia is the citizens, the citizenry. We talked before about we the people. Who are the people? So the militia, as the Second Amendment guarantees that right to keep and bear arms, is the citizenry ability to also exercise in the right of assembly, to to come together to support the Constitution. And if there's a disaster or situation where the sheriff needs that citizenry, that militia, the sheriff can call them up. That's a good thing to know if you're sheriff.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Acceptance of federal funds usually comes with strings attached. Is there such a thing as a good state or federal grant program? And give 2 examples of a good grant program and 2 examples where we should refuse state and federal grant money.
Well, as a constitutionalist, I always go back to our basic documents and make sure that if there is a grant, that is what it is attempting to accomplish is directed at an actual authorized power that's granted to whatever agency in the executive branch that's going to carry that out. Now, we have balance of power, so we have the legislative branch, and those individuals, as we vet them and elect them, we hope and pray that they'll actually represent the people's wishes according to the Constitution. So, for example, the requirement that the government provide for the common defense would be an area that would be a valid use. A grant would simply mean allocating taxpayer dollars to accomplish a particular end. So absolutely, they're good grants. I think the problems come up in the execution of them, and the sheriff is no exception. The sheriff can excellently execute a program or can botch it. And, we read about good things and bad things all the time. As far as examples, dealing with illegal immigration. I mean, if you have people coming over your borders, for whatever reason, but also people that might be terrorists coming into the country. I mean, a grant program that would go towards shoring up those defenses would, in my mind, be a great use of the taxpayers' dollars. And there's a lot of people tell me they wish there was more of that going on. But if it's something about just that's putting money in someone's pocket or helping a business enterprise, I wouldn't want the government to give my business money because that's not fair to the other businesses out there. So, good and bad out there.
Thank you. The U.S. Constitution, this is your last question.
Okay.
The U.S. Constitution is the supreme law in America. See Article 6. Sharia law contradicts the Bill of Rights in several areas. Are you aware of attempts to enforce Sharia law in the United States? And what would you do if a local legislative body enacted a law or ordinance that supported Sharia law over the U.S. Constitution?
Well, you spoke that very accurately, and we are a nation. We have our Constitution and all of the laws that have followed over the years from that. So, no, absolutely, I agree with you. Sharia law would be, a violation of that sovereignty. There have already been, if you Google, I think it's Islamic Court of Texas, you'll get information about, I think it was in Tarrant County in a courtroom where there was a referral to something of that nature that was a Sharia type. No, it's unacceptable. Now, our Constitution guarantees in the First Amendment also that the freedom, and we have, our citizens are guaranteed the right to practice, their religion. The government can't establish a religion, and they can't prevent people from the free practice of their religion. And, I know many people, many Islamic people here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and many that I've worked with, that I consider friends, as people, many different cultures and many different religions. And I have good rapport with them, and I think I understand their concerns, and I have some who've actually told me, would agree with me, that we can't have a two-track legal system. And so it's not anti-Islamic, it's nothing like that. It's just of respect for our Constitution and our laws as the supreme law of our land. And we have a great history of American exceptionalism, and we've provided for a safe country through that, and I wouldn't want to change that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.